We got lost on a lonely road at night. And my girlfriend, Mom, and I ended up in the same room. Wait, till you hear what happened. Have you ever made one simple decision that completely changed your life? A decision so ordinary that you never imagined it would destroy your reputation, your relationship, and nearly your future. If you have, then you know exactly how this story begins. My name is Daniel. Until that weekend, I thought my biggest concern was finding the perfect engagement ring for my girlfriend, Sarah. We had been together for almost 3 years. I loved her with everything I had. She was kind, hardworking, and the only woman I had ever pictured spending the rest of my life with. The only problem: her mother. Mrs. Grace never liked me. She wasn't rude. She wasn't disrespectful. But every time she looked at me, I felt like she was silently asking herself one question. Is this man really good enough for my daughter? No matter how hard I tried, I could never win her over. If I bought groceries, she said I was trying too hard. If I stayed quiet, she said I wasn't confident. If I spoke too much, she said I was immature. It seemed like I could never get it right. Sarah always defended me. Mom, Daniel is a good man. Grace would simply smile. We'll see. I learned to live with it. After all, I wasn't dadding her mother. I was dadding Sarah, or at least. That's what I thought. Everything changed on a rainy Saturday afternoon. I was fixing a leaking tap in my apartment when my phone rang. It was Sarah. Her voice trembled. Daniel, I need a favor. Anything. My mom traveled to my aunt's village this morning. Her car broke down somewhere on the old express road. The mechanic she called can't reach her because of the storm. Where are you? I'm stuck at work. My boss won't let me leave. She paused. Please. Can you go and pick her up? For a moment, I hesitated. Not because I didn't want to help, but because spending several hours alone with Mrs. Grace sounded like one of the longest days of my life. Still, she was Sarah's mother, so I agreed. An hour later, I found Mrs. Grace standing beside her broken-down SUV. The rain poured endlessly. She looked exhausted. When she saw me, she forced a small smile. I didn't expect Sarah to send you. She couldn't leave work. I loaded her luggage into my car. We began the drive home. For the first 30 minutes. Silence, only the sound of rain hitting the windshield. Then she suddenly spoke. You really love my daughter, don't you? The question caught me off guard. I do. She stared through the window. Love is easy in the beginning. I glanced at her. The difficult part is proving it when life becomes hard. I nodded but said nothing. Little did I know. Life was already about to test both of us. The rain became heavier. Visibility dropped. My GPS suddenly froze. No signal. I frowned. Mrs. Grace looked at my dashboard. Maybe keep driving. I took the next turn, believing it would reconnect to the main highway instead. The paved road disappeared. The tires rolled onto rough dirt. Tall trees surrounded us. The deeper we drove, the darker it became then. The GPS screen went completely black. My phone lost signal. Mrs. Grace checked hers. No service. An uneasy silence filled the car. I slowed down. I don't think we're on the right road. She looked ahead. I don't think anyone uses this road anymore. Lightning flashed across the sky. The thunder shook the entire car before I could turn around. The front tires sank into thick mud. The engine struggled. I pressed the accelerator. Nothing. Again, nothing. The wheels spun helplessly. Mud sprayed everywhere then. The engine stalled. Complete silence. Mrs. Grace whispered the words I never wanted to hear. Daniel. I think we're stranded. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. The rain hammered against the roof of the car as if the storm had no intention of stopping. I tried starting the engine again, once, twice, 3 times, nothing. Mrs. Grace looked at me. How much fuel do we have left? Enough. Fuel isn't the problem. I stepped out into the rain to inspect the tires. The mud swallowed my shoes with every step. The front wheels were buried almost halfway. There was no way I could push the car out alone. When I got back inside, I was soaked. What do we do now? She asked quietly. I looked at my phone again, still no signal. We wait for the rain to ease, then we'll see if we can find help. An hour passed, then another. Darkness settled over the lonely road. There were no headlights, no houses, no passing vehicles, only the sound of insects and the wind moving through the trees. Mrs. Grace wrapped her arms around herself. It's getting cold. I handed her my jacket. She hesitated. Need it. You need it more. She finally accepted it with a grateful smile. It was the first genuine smile I had ever seen from her. We can't stay in the car all night, I said. If someone lives nearby, we need to find them before it gets any darker. She nodded. We grabbed a flashlight from the glove compartment and started walking. The muddy road seemed endless. Every strange sound made us stop. Every rustling bush made our hearts race. After nearly 40 minutes, a faint light appeared in the distance. See something? I whispered. As we got closer, we realized it was a small roadside guest house. The paint was peeling, the sign was barely hanging on, and it looked as though it had seen better days. I knocked on the wooden door. An elderly man opened it slowly. "You two are lucky," he said. "Another hour and this storm would have made the road impossible." "Do you have any rooms?" I asked. He sighed. "Only one." Grace and I looked at each other. "We'll take it," she replied. The room was tiny, one old bed, one chair. One small window, a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling. I immediately placed my backpack on the floor. "You take the bed," I said, "and you?" "I'll sleep on the floor," she frowned. "The floor is cold." "Be fine." The old man returned with an extra blanket and a thin mattress. "It's all I have." "Thank you," I replied. After he left, the silence returned. The storm outside grew louder. Mrs. Grace sat on the edge of the bed. "You know," she said softly, "I've judged you unfairly." Looked up in surprise. "I lost my husband when Sarah was young. Since then, I've worried about every person who came into her life." "I understand," I answered. "I wasn't trying to make your life difficult. I was afraid." I nodded. "I'd probably feel the same if I had a daughter." The first time, we talked honestly, not as two people who disliked each other, but as two people who both loved Sarah. Hours later, the electricity suddenly went out. The room became completely dark. Only flashes of lightning lit the walls every few seconds. Neither of us slept much. We simply waited for morning, hoping the storm would pass and we could finally get home. We had no idea that while we were trying to survive the night, someone outside had seen us enter that room together, and by sunrise, a single photograph would be enough to turn our lives upside down. I barely slept. The storm finally stopped just before sunrise. I got up quietly and looked out the window. The sky was beginning to clear and birds were singing as if nothing had happened. Mrs. Grace was already awake. "Guess we made it through the night," she said with a tired smile. I nodded. "Let's get home." After thanking the elderly guest house owner, we stepped outside. A local farmer driving an old pickup truck offered to help after hearing about our car. Together, we managed to pull it out of the mud. I couldn't stop smiling. The nightmare was over, or so I thought. As we drove back toward the city, my phone suddenly buzzed. Signal had returned. Within seconds, dozens of missed calls and unread messages flooded my screen. Sarah had called me 23 times. There were messages from friends, cousins, even people I barely knew. Before I could read them, my phone rang again. It was Sarah. I answered immediately. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. We lost. Don't lie to me." Her voice shook with anger. "Where are you?" "We're on our way home." "I know exactly where you've been." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" I saw the picture. My heart skipped a beat. "What picture?" She hung up. I looked at Mrs. Grace. She had gone pale. "My phone," she whispered. She opened a family WhatsApp group. There it was, a blurry photograph of the two of us leaving the guest house early that morning. The caption read, "Looks like Daniel found a new woman, and she's his girlfriend's mother." Someone had added laughing emojis. Others were already making cruel comments. I always knew something was strange. Decent man spends the night with his girlfriend's mother. Sarah. More messages kept appearing every second. Mrs. Grace covered her mouth. "This is terrible." I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Who took that picture?" She shook her head. "I don't know." By the time we reached Sarah's apartment, a crowd had gathered outside. Neighbors stood whispering. Some stared openly as we stepped out of the car. Sarah was waiting near the entrance. Tears streamed down her face. She looked at her mother, then at me. "I trusted both of you." I stepped forward. "Sarah, please let me explain." She took a step back. "Explain what?" "That you spent the whole night in the same room with my mother. There was only one room because of the storm." "Had no choice," Mrs. Grace added. But Sarah wasn't listening. "If there was nothing wrong, why didn't either of you call me?" "There was no signal," I said. She laughed bitterly. "That's convenient." I reached into my pocket to show her my phone's missing call log and the time the signal returned. Before I could speak, her uncle walked over. "Insult her intelligence," he snapped. "You should be ashamed of yourself." More relatives began arriving. Some glared at me, others refused to even look at Mrs. Grace. The whispers became louder. The accusations became harsher. No one wanted to hear the truth. They had already decided what happened. As Sarah looked into my eyes, I realized something that hurt more than anything else. She didn't believe me, and in that moment, I feared I had lost the woman I loved forever. The next 2 days were the longest of my life. Sarah stopped answering my calls. She blocked my messages. Every time I tried to explain, she refused to listen. The rumor had spread far beyond our families. People at church whispered when I walked in. Some of my coworkers gave me strange looks. Others avoided me completely. One photograph had done more damage than 100 lies. What hurt me most wasn't that strangers believed it. It was that Sarah did. I couldn't accept it. Someone had taken that picture on purpose. And I was determined to find out who. That evening, I drove back to the lonely guest house. The old owner recognized me immediately. "I knew you'd be back," he said. "You did," he nodded. "The morning you left, another man came here asking questions." My heart started pounding. "What kind of questions?" "He wanted to know exactly when you checked in, and whether you shared the room." "What did you tell him?" I told him the truth. The old man looked me straight in the eyes. I told him there was only one room left. I also told him you slept on the floor while the lady took the bed. I let out a slow breath. So someone already knew the truth. "You recognize the man," the owner thought for a moment. "Never seen him before, but I remember one thing." "What?" He drove a black SUV with a cracked left headlight. That wasn't much to go on, but it was something. As I thanked him and turned to leave, he called out to me. "Young man," I stopped. "People are quick to believe the worst. Don't give up proving the truth." His words stayed with me all the way home. The next morning, I received an unexpected phone call. It was Mrs. Grace. "Daniel, can we meet?" An hour later, we sat across from each other in a quiet cafe. She looked exhausted. "Been thinking," she said. "About what?" "About who would benefit from destroying your relationship with Sarah." I frowned. "What do you mean?" She leaned closer. 3 weeks ago, Sarah's ex-boyfriend came to our house. My eyes widened. Her ex. He wanted another chance. "What happened?" I told him to leave. She sighed. "He wasn't happy. Before he left, he said something I'll never forget." "What did he say?" She looked down at her coffee. "He said, 'If I can't have Sarah, neither will Daniel.'" A chill ran down my spine. Could this have been revenge? Could someone have been following us all along? Just then, my phone vibrated. It was an unknown number. I answered. Distorted voice spoke quietly. "If you really want to know who took the photograph." My heart raced. "Meet me tonight. Come alone." Before I could ask another question, the call ended. I stared at the phone. Mrs. Grace looked at me nervously. "Who was it?" I swallowed hard. I think we're finally getting closer to the truth." I looked at the time. 8:17 p.m. The unknown caller had told me to come alone to an old gas station just outside town. Every instinct told me not to go. But if this was my only chance to clear my name, I couldn't ignore it. I texted one person before leaving, Mrs. Grace. Following a lead. "If you don't hear from me in 2 hours, call the police." Then I got into my car. The drive felt longer than usual. The roads were nearly empty. When I reached the abandoned gas station, only one streetlight was working. Its flickering light barely reached the cracked pavement. I stepped out of my car and looked around. Answer. Then I heard footsteps behind me. I turned quickly. A young man wearing a black hoodie raised both hands. "Relax. I'm not here to hurt you." "Then why all the secrecy?" He looked around nervously before speaking. "Because the people behind this don't know I found out." My heart skipped a beat. "What do you know?" He pulled out his phone. "I work at a roadside restaurant about 2 kilometers from that guest house." So, the morning after the storm, I recognized the man who took your picture. My stomach tightened. "You saw him?" "Yes." He was bragging to his friends. "What did he say?" The young man swallowed. "He said all he needed was one picture. He knew people would believe the worst." I felt my hands clench into fists. "Did he mention his name?" "No, but..." He zoomed in on a photo saved on his phone. I secretly took this because something felt off. He handed me the phone. There it was. A black SUV parked outside the restaurant. The left headlight was cracked, exactly as the guest house owner had described. The license plate was visible. It wasn't perfectly clear, but most of the numbers could be read. "This is incredible," I whispered. "Take a picture of it," the young man said. "Probably need it." As I thanked him, he grabbed my arm. "One more thing." "What?" He wasn't acting alone. "Do you mean there was a woman with him?" "Woman," he nodded. "They kept laughing about how Sarah would never forgive you after seeing that picture." I felt sick. Who was she? Someone from Sarah's family, a friend, or someone I had never even met? The questions raced through my mind. The next morning, I took the license plate information to a friend who worked at a vehicle registration office. By afternoon, he called me back. "Daniel." His voice sounded serious. "I found the owner." "Is it?" There was a long silence. Then he finally answered. "The SUV belongs to someone connected to Sarah's past." My pulse quickened. "Who?" "It's registered to her ex-boyfriend's older brother." For a moment, I couldn't speak. Mrs. Grace had been right. This wasn't an accident. Someone had planned this from the very beginning. But proving they staged the scandal would be much harder than finding out who they were. And I had no idea that an even bigger secret was about to come to light. I couldn't stop staring at the registration record. Sarah's ex-boyfriend's older brother. It couldn't be a coincidence. The black SUV, the cracked headlight, the photograph, everything pointed in the same direction. But suspicion wasn't enough. I needed proof. If I accused someone without evidence, Sarah would think I was inventing excuses. That evening, Mrs. Grace came to my apartment. For the first time since all this began, she looked determined instead of frightened. "We're going to fight this," she said. I nodded. "But we need evidence." She reached into her handbag and placed a small piece of paper on the table. "Owner of the guest house gave me this. It was a receipt. The date matched the night we stayed there. Written at the bottom were the room details. Room 3, 2 guests. Extra mattress provided." I looked at her. "He remembered you slept on the floor," she said. "He even wrote it down because he charged for the extra mattress." Hope began to return. "This helps." "It's still not enough," she replied. People who wanted to believe the rumor could simply claim we were lying. The next morning, I visited the guest house owner again. When he saw me, he walked inside without saying a word. He returned carrying an old notebook. "I keep records of every guest." He opened it to the correct page. There, beside our names, was another note. "Guest requested extra mattress immediately upon arrival." He looked at me. "I wrote that because I almost didn't have one." I smiled for the first time in days. "Would you be willing to tell the police or your family the same?" Didn't hesitate. "Yes." As I was leaving, a voice called my name. It was the farmer who had pulled my car out of the mud. "I heard what people are saying," he said. "I know it's not true." "Do." I arrived early that morning. He pointed toward the road. "When I found you, you were both outside the guest house waiting for help. The lady was wrapped in a blanket, and you were covered in mud from trying to free the car." He paused. "You looked exhausted, not like two people hiding an affair." I thanked him. Another witness, another piece of the puzzle. That afternoon, I asked Mrs. Grace to arrange a family meeting. Everyone came: Sarah, her uncles, her cousins, close family friends. The atmosphere was tense. No one smiled when I walked into the room. Sarah folded her arms. "I hope you have a good reason for asking all of us to come." "I do." I placed the guest house receipt on the table, then the guest register. Then photographs of the extra mattress. Finally, I introduced the guest house owner and the farmer. One after another, they told exactly the same story. No one interrupted, no one laughed. When they finished speaking, the room fell silent. Sarah looked down at the documents for the first time since the rumors began. Doubt appeared on her face. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. If this is true." Before she could finish her sentence, the front door swung open. A young woman rushed inside, breathing heavily. "I'm sorry I'm late," she said, "but I know who took that photograph." Every head in the room turned toward her. "And I have a video that changes everything." Room fell completely silent. Every pair of eyes was fixed on the young woman standing at the doorway. She looked nervous, clutching her phone tightly. Sarah's uncle spoke first. "Who are you?" "My name is Anita," she replied. "I used to work at the roadside restaurant near the old guest house." I immediately recognized her. She was the woman the young man at the abandoned gas station had mentioned. She looked at me with regret. "I'm sorry," I frowned. "What?" "I should have come forward sooner." Sarah stepped closer. "What do you know?" Anita took a deep breath. "The morning after the storm, 2 men came into the restaurant laughing. One of them kept showing everyone a photograph of Daniel and your mother." Mrs. Grace gasped. "They were celebrating." Anita nodded. "I thought it was just cruel gossip, until I overheard their conversation." "What did they say?" Sarah asked. "They said, 1 picture is all we needed. She'll never trust him again." The room became deathly quiet. Anita unlocked her phone. I wasn't trying to spy on them. I was recording a birthday message for my sister. She pressed play. The video wasn't focused on the men. It showed the restaurant tables, people eating, children running around, but in the background, the voices were clear. A familiar voice laughed. "Sarah will never forgive him after this." Another man replied, "All because they spent one night hiding from the rain." Then the first voice said something that made everyone freeze. "She doesn't have to know they slept separately. Let people imagine the rest." Video ended. No one spoke. Sarah's hands began to shake. She slowly turned toward me. "Oh my God." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "I'm so sorry. I wanted to say something, but years of trust had been shattered in just a few days. Words wouldn't fix that." Mrs. Grace gently placed a hand on Sarah's shoulder. "I told you the truth from the beginning." Sarah broke down crying. "I know, Mom, I know." Just then, Sarah's cousin, Michael, who had been silent throughout the meeting, spoke up. "Know that voice?" Everyone looked at him. "Whose voice?" I asked. Michael swallowed hard. "It belongs to Victor." The room erupted in whispers. "Victor, Sarah's ex-boyfriend," Michael continued. "He came to me 2 weeks ago asking strange questions." What kind of questions? Mrs. Grace asked. He wanted to know your mother's travel plans. He also asked whether Daniel usually helped your family. My heart sank. So he knew we'd be together. Michael nodded slowly. I didn't think anything of it at the time. Sarah covered her face with both hands. He planned everything. Before anyone could respond, my phone rang. It was the police officer I had spoken to earlier about the harassment. I answered. Hello, Mr. Daniel. Yes, we've identified the owner of the black SUV from the evidence you submitted. I know who it belongs to. Good, the officer replied. Because we've just received another complaint. What complaint? It appears the same vehicle was used in 2 similar harassment cases involving fake relationship rumors. My heart raced. This wasn't just revenge. Victor had done this before. And if the police were right, there were other victims still waiting for justice. The room was silent after the call with the police. No one knew what to say. Sarah slowly walked toward me, her eyes red from crying. Daniel, I know saying I'm sorry isn't enough. I looked at her but didn't answer. The pain of being doubted by the person I loved was still fresh. Mrs. Grace broke the silence. Police want to speak with all of us. We should cooperate. Within an hour, we were sitting inside the local police station. The officer placed Anita's video, the guest house receipt, the guest register, and the photo of the black SUV on the table. This is strong evidence, he said. But we still need the person responsible to admit what happened. Just then, another officer entered. We've located Victor. My heart skipped a beat. He agreed to come in for questioning. About 20 minutes later, Victor walked into the station with his older brother. The moment he saw Sarah standing beside me, his confident smile disappeared. The officer pointed to a chair. Sit. Victor folded his arms. Done nothing wrong. Officer placed Anita's phone on the table and played the recording. Victor's face changed. He glanced at his brother. Neither of them spoke. Then the officer placed the enlarged photograph of the black SUV beside the video. We also have witnesses who saw your vehicle near the guest house. Victor forced a laugh. So what? Taking a picture isn't a crime. The officer replied calmly. But creating false rumors to intentionally damage someone's reputation can have legal consequences. The first time, Victor looked nervous. Sarah stared at him. Why? Victor avoided her eyes. Why would you do this? She repeated. He remained silent. Then his older brother sighed deeply. It's over, Victor. Victor slammed his fist on the table. No, she was supposed to come back to me. Everyone froze. He looked directly at Sarah. I begged you for another chance. You chose him instead. So I decided that if I couldn't have you, then neither of you deserved to be happy. Sarah shook her head in disbelief. You tried to destroy my family. Victor laughed bitterly. Only gave people a picture. They created the story themselves. Daniel finally spoke. You knew exactly what people would think. Victor didn't answer. The silence was all the confirmation anyone needed. The officer stood. Based on the evidence and your statements, this investigation will continue. You are not to contact Daniel, Sarah, or Mrs. Grace while the case is ongoing. Victor lowered his head as another officer escorted him from the room. As the door closed behind him, Sarah turned to me. Tears streamed down her face. I believed a lie. Let one photograph destroy 3 years of trust. She reached for my hand. I don't expect you to forgive me today. I hope, one day, you'll give me the chance to earn your trust back. Looked at her for a long moment. The woman I loved stood before me, broken by a mistake she could never take back, whether our relationship could survive. Only time would tell. 3 months passed. The rumors that had spread so quickly were finally beginning to disappear. The police completed their investigation. Victor admitted that he had followed us after learning Mrs. Grace was traveling. When he saw us enter the roadside guest house, he waited outside until morning, took the photograph, and shared it with a false story hoping people would fill in the rest. His plan had worked for a while. But lies don't last forever. The truth eventually catches up. Several weeks later, Victor publicly apologized to our families. It couldn't erase the pain he had caused, but it cleared our names. People who had judged us without asking questions slowly began to admit they had been wrong. Some even came to apologize. I accepted their apologies, but I had learned something important. A damaged reputation takes much longer to repair than it does to destroy. As for Sarah, we didn't get back together immediately. Trust doesn't return overnight. She knew that. Instead of asking me to forgive her every day, she gave me the space I needed. Sometimes she would send a simple message. I hope you're doing okay. Nothing more, no pressure, no excuses, just kindness. One afternoon, several months later, I received a call from Mrs. Grace. Daniel, she said, Would you come over for dinner? There's something I'd like to say. I hesitated before agreeing. When I arrived, the dining table was already set. Sarah was there. She smiled nervously. Mrs. Grace stood up holding a small envelope. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Owe you an apology." She handed me the envelope. Inside was a letter. It was written in her own handwriting. She had poured out everything she had never found the courage to say. She apologized for judging me before truly knowing me. She thanked me for protecting her during the storm, for giving her your jacket, for insisting she take the bed while you slept on the floor, and for never taking advantage of a difficult situation. "I used to wonder if you were good enough for my daughter," she said softly. "Now I know the better question was whether we were good enough for you." Room fell silent. I looked at Sarah. She was crying. "So am I forgiven?" she whispered. I walked toward her. "I can't pretend none of this happened." She lowered her head. "But I also can't ignore the years we spent building something real." She looked up. "Want us to start again? From where we left off? But from the beginning." A smile slowly appeared through her tears. "I'd like that." 1 year later, I stood in front of a small gathering of family and friends. This time, everyone was smiling. Mrs. Grace walked over, carrying a small velvet box. She handed it to me. "Been carrying this in your pocket long enough." I opened it. Inside was the engagement ring I had bought before everything fell apart. She laughed. "I think it's time you finally used it." My hands trembled as I turned toward Sarah. I knelt on one knee. "Sarah, life took us down a lonely road we never expected. We were tested by fear, rumors, and broken trust. But through it all, I never stopped believing that truth matters and that love is worth fighting for. Will you marry me?" Before I could finish, she threw her arms around me. "Yes." The room erupted in cheers. Mrs. Grace wiped away happy tears. "This time," she said with a smile, "I don't just welcome you into the family. I'm proud to call you my son." As we celebrated, I thought back to that stormy night on the lonely road. At the time, it felt like the worst thing that had ever happened. But it revealed who truly stood for the truth, who was willing to lie, and who had the courage to admit when they were wrong. Sometimes the darkest roads don't lead to disaster. Sometimes they lead you home. If this story touched your heart, remember this lesson. Never judge a situation from a single photo or a single rumor. The truth often has a story that no one else can see. And if you haven't subscribed, please do well to subscribe.